My son's bride stood at the microphone, champagne glass in hand, and told 150 wedding guests that I was low-class trash, that my alcoholism made me unfit for polite society. She'd put me at table 12, right next to the kitchen door, where the servers came in and out carrying dirty dishes. She thought that was where I belonged. But there were two things Patrice didn't know that night. The first, I'd spent 3 weeks discovering that her entire old money California family were professional actors, hired at $1,500 a day each from a casting agency in Los Angeles. The second, the prescription bottle I saw fall out of her purse the night before. Oxycodone, 60 pills prescribed by a doctor I'd never heard of, was about to change everything. Because the woman who called me damaged goods for being a recovering alcoholic was popping opioids throughout her own engagement. When the truth came out, her fake family literally ran from the reception. Pills scattered across the head table like confetti at the world's worst party. My son took off his wedding ring and set it down next to them. But what happened after that? What Patrice told me when everyone else had left? That's the part I never expected. The part that broke my heart and put it back together in the same breath. My name is Doreen Howard. I'm 62 years old. I've been sober for 15 years, and I run 8 recovery centers across Arizona that have helped over 4,000 people rebuild their lives. But on the night of October 14th, 2024, none of that mattered. To my son's bride, I was just a drunk who got lucky. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. It started 6 months before the wedding, the first time Patrice Morrison came to family dinner. I'll never forget driving to Malcolm's apartment in Scottsdale that Saturday afternoon. I had a bouquet of wild daisies on the passenger seat, the same kind my late husband Robert used to buy me every Friday from the little flower stand on Camelback Road. Robert had been gone 16 years by then, but I still bought those daisies every week. Some habits you keep because letting go of them means letting go of the person. Malcolm had called that morning. "Mom, I want you to meet someone. Her name's Patrice. We've been seeing each other for about a month." He sounded nervous, which made me nervous. Malcolm, my Mal, was 30 years old, 6 years sober, working as a structural engineer at Reeves and Whitaker downtown. He was the reason I got clean in the first place. When he was 15, a sophomore in high school, still growing into his father's jawline, and I was drinking a bottle of Smirnoff before noon, he sat me down at this very kitchen table and said, "Mom, I can't watch you die. If you won't get help for yourself, get help for me." I checked into Desert Springs Treatment Center the next day, November 3rd, 2009. I remember the date the way some people remember birthdays. So when my son said he'd met someone, I wanted to be happy. I wanted to walk into that apartment with open arms and an open heart. I knocked on the door with the daisies in one hand and a Tupperware of my peach cobbler in the other. Malcolm opened it, and there she was. Patrice was sitting on his couch with her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. The kind of beautiful that takes work and money. Her dark hair was blown out perfectly straight. Her nails were done in that French manicure style that costs $80 at the nice salons. She wore a cream silk blouse and tailored slacks that probably cost more than my first car. Everything about her looked assembled, curated, like a photograph in a magazine. Not like a woman who'd gotten dressed that morning, like a woman who'd been styled. She looked up when I walked in, and something flickered across her face. It was fast, half a second, maybe less, but I caught it. I'd spent 15 years reading people's faces in group therapy sessions. I knew what that flicker meant. Disappointment. I held out the daisies. "These are for you. Welcome to the family." Patrice looked at the bouquet. Then she looked at my hands. Clean, but rough. Working hands. Hands that had scrubbed floors in early recovery, that had signed business contracts worth millions, that had held my dying husband's fingers in a hospital room. Hands that told a story she didn't want to read. She pulled her own hand back slightly. Not a flinch, more like a withdrawal, like I might contaminate her. "Tommy didn't mention you were coming," she said. "Not how lovely to meet you, not thank you for the flowers. Just a flat statement that I was unexpected, unwanted." Malcolm, she called him Tommy, which he'd never gone by in his life, stepped in quickly. "Mom, this is Patrice. Patrice, this is my mother, Doreen." Patrice gave me a smile so thin you could have sliced bread with it. Oh, the one with the situation. The situation. That's what she called 15 years of sobriety. 15 years of waking up every morning and choosing not to drink. 15 years of building something from the wreckage of what I'd destroyed. 2 words, and she reduced all of it to an embarrassment. A footnote, a thing to be managed. I set the flowers on the counter. Nice to meet you too, Patrice. But it wasn't nice. I watched her eyes scan my clothes. Clean jeans, white button-down shirt, the brown leather boots I'd worn for 8 years because they were comfortable and broken in, and mine. Nothing fancy, nothing wrong either. Her expression said otherwise. Malcolm mentioned you work in construction? Recovery? She said recovery the way you'd say sewage treatment. Technically important, fundamentally unpleasant. I run recovery centers, I corrected. 8 of them across Arizona, 212 employees as of last month. She nodded like I'd said I collected aluminum cans. That's important work. The way she said important told me everything I needed to know about Patrice Morrison. This girl thought I was nobody, and she'd already decided that nothing I said or did would change her mind. Over the next few months, the signs multiplied like weeds in a garden you're too tired to tend. Every time I visited Malcolm's apartment, Patrice would pick up her purse, a Gucci crossbody, caramel leather, $2,300 retail, and carry it with her to the bedroom. Every single time. Like I might root through it the moment she turned her back. I'd spent 15 years around people in recovery, people who'd stolen from their own mothers to fund their habits, and I understood the instinct. But I wasn't that person anymore. I hadn't been that person in a long, long time. And Patrice wasn't protecting herself from a threat. She was making a statement. When we went out to dinner, a steakhouse on Scottsdale Road that Malcolm loved, Patrice insisted on separate checks. Not because she believed in splitting costs, because she didn't want to share a meal with me, not even on paper. When I mentioned my business, a new center opening in Tempe, a client who'd just celebrated 5 years clean, the grant we'd received from the Arizona Department of Health, Patrice would change the subject mid-sentence. The weather, a restaurant she'd been meaning to try, anything, everything, as long as it had nothing to do with addiction, recovery, or the life I'd built from the rubble of the one I'd destroyed. But the worst part, the part that kept me up at night, was watching my son change. Malcolm used to call me every Sunday morning at 9. We'd talk for an hour, sometimes 2, about his job at the engineering firm, about his own recovery, 6 years clean from the Adderall he'd started taking in college, the pills that had spiraled into something darker before he got help, about life, about nothing, about everything. After Patrice, those calls became sporadic. Every other week, then once a month. And when we did talk, Malcolm sounded different, careful, like he was choosing his words the way you'd choose your steps through a minefield. The call that broke something in me came on a Tuesday evening in July. I was standing in my office at the New Hope Recovery Center on East Indian School Road, watching through the window as a group of clients walked across the courtyard to their evening session. Real people fighting real battles. A 40-year-old teacher trying to get her license back. A 26-year-old veteran who'd lost 3 friends in Afghanistan and found comfort at the bottom of a bottle. A grandmother, not much younger than me, who'd started drinking after her husband's diagnosis. Mom, maybe you could tone down the recovery stuff around Steph. I watched the grandmother, her name was Phyllis, hold the door open for the veteran. Small kindnesses. That's what recovery looked like up close. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just people being decent to each other one day at a time. Tone down the recovery stuff, I repeated. She just thinks it's kind of heavy. Her family's more discreet about personal matters. Discreet. They're private people, Mom. Old money. They don't broadcast their personal lives. I wanted to say, Malcolm, there's a difference between discretion and shame. I wanted to say, the woman you're planning to marry is asking you to hide the thing that saved your life. I wanted to say your father would never have tolerated this. Robert would have looked Patrice in the eye and said, my wife's recovery is the bravest thing I've ever witnessed, and if that makes you uncomfortable, the door is right there. But Robert was gone. 16 years in the ground at Green Acres Memorial Cemetery, Plot 247, Section C. And the reason he was there, the real reason, the one I carried like a stone in my chest, was me. Robert died driving home on a rainy Tuesday night, because I was too drunk to pick up our son from baseball practice. He was rushing. The roads were slick. The truck that ran the red light on 32nd Street never even braked. Robert was 51 years old. Malcolm was 14. And I was passed out on the living room couch with an empty bottle of Absolute on the carpet beside me. I didn't get sober right away. That's the part people don't understand about grief and addiction. Losing Robert didn't snap me out of it. It pushed me deeper. For a year after the funeral, I drank more than ever. Malcolm moved in with Robert's mother. I lost the house. I lost everything except the ability to open another bottle. It was Malcolm who pulled me back. A 15-year-old kid sitting across from his mother at a kitchen table that didn't even belong to us anymore, saying the words that saved my life. "Mom, I can't watch you die." So when my son asked me to hide, I hid. Because that's what mothers do when they've already cost their children too much. We swallow our pride to keep the peace. But every time I swallowed, it tasted a little more like the vodka I used to drink. Here's the thing about Patrice's family that never quite added up. If they were so wealthy and established, old money California, she said, real estate and investments, why had I never seen a single photograph of them? Not on Malcolm's mantle, not on Patrice's phone, not anywhere. 6 months of dating, and Malcolm had never met them, never visited their home, never spoken to her father on the phone, or received a birthday card from her mother. Nothing. They live in Palos Verdes, Patrice told me once when I asked directly. It's a very private community. They don't do social media. They don't do casual visits. When you come from a certain background, you learn that accessibility is vulgar. Vulgar. That was a word Patrice used a lot. My boots were vulgar. My daisies were vulgar. My recovery was vulgar. Anything that was mine was, by definition, beneath her. But late one night, after Malcolm had gone to bed and I was sitting alone in my living room with a cup of chamomile tea and my laptop, I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I Googled them. Morrison Family California Real Estate. Nothing. Morrison Palos Verdes Investments. Nothing. Hartwell Properties California. The name Patrice had once mentioned as her father's company. Nothing. Not a website, not a business registration, not a single mention anywhere on the internet. I tried her father's name, Richard Morrison. Thousands of results, none of them matching. I tried her mother, Catherine Morrison. Same thing. I searched for the Hartwell Foundation, the charity Patrice claimed to work for. I found a website, sleek, professional, full of stock photographs and mission statements about empowering underserved communities. But the domain had been registered only 6 months earlier. And when I clicked on the Our Team page, every face was a stock photo. I'd spent enough time building websites for my recovery centers to recognize Getty Images watermarks that had been poorly cropped out. Most people would have let it go, told themselves they were being paranoid, an overbearing mother-in-law with too much time and too little trust. But I'd spent 15 years learning that ignoring red flags doesn't make them go away. It just gives them time to become catastrophes. The final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was at Malcolm's apartment helping him reorganize his home office. Patrice was in the kitchen, and I could hear her voice drifting down the hallway. She was on the phone, with her mother, I assumed. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the apartment was small, and Patrice wasn't trying to be quiet. "No, Mother, you don't understand. His mother has a past. Alcohol. Serious alcohol problems." I stopped moving. Set down the box of files I'd been carrying. I know. But what can I do? Malcolm's already too attached to her. She's got this whole recovery warrior identity. It's exhausting. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. Not yet. From the effort of standing perfectly still while someone dissected your life from 40 feet away. Well, at least we won't have to socialize with her much after the wedding. I've made sure she's at table 12, near the service entrance. The kitchen staff will be going in and out, so it'll be noisy. She won't bother anyone important back there. Table 12, near the service entrance, with the kitchen staff. I've been called worse things in my life. Drunk, deadbeat, unfit mother. I heard them all in that courtroom in 2010 when Malcolm's paternal grandmother tried to get custody. I heard them whispered at Robert's funeral. I heard them in my own head every morning for years. But there was something about the way Patrice said it. Casual, practical, like she was deciding where to put a potted plant, that cut deeper than any name I'd ever been called. And then I noticed something else. The voice on the other end of the phone, the woman Patrice called Mother, sounded strange, formal, measured, like someone reading from a script rather than talking to her own daughter. There was no warmth in it, no familiarity, no shorthand that families develop over decades of shared meals and arguments and bedtime stories. It sounded like a performance. I picked up the box of files and walked quietly back to the office. I didn't say anything to Malcolm, not yet, because I'd learned something else in 15 years of recovery. Accusations without evidence make you look desperate, and desperate people get dismissed. I needed proof, and I was going to get it. 2 weeks before the wedding, my oldest friend saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, the mistake of staying silent. Brenda Holloway drove up from Tucson on a Wednesday morning. We'd been friends since our AA days. She'd gotten sober 3 months after me, and we'd been each other's emergency phone calls ever since. Brenda was 64, a retired high school English teacher with reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose and a bullshit detector that could pick up signals from outer space. We sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the peach cobbler nobody at Malcolm's apartment had touched. I told her everything. The daisies Patrice wouldn't take, the purse she carried like a shield, the phone call, table 12, the family that didn't exist on the internet. Brenda listened without interrupting, a teacher's discipline, and when I finished, she set down her coffee mug and said, "Show me the wedding website. I want to see these fancy people." I opened my laptop and navigated to the site. It was beautifully designed, ivory and gold, calligraphy fonts, a timeline of Malcolm and Patrice's relationship illustrated with professional photos. There was a section called Our Families, with pictures from an engagement party a few months back. Patrice's family was there, a distinguished silver-haired father, an elegant mother dripping in jewelry, 2 aunts, an uncle, and a cousin. All of them smiling, all of them perfectly dressed, all of them radiating the kind of effortless wealth that takes serious effort to fake. Brenda leaned forward, squinting at the screen. She tapped one of the photos, a man in his 50s with a salt and pepper mustache and a charming smile. Patrice's Uncle Raymond. "Doreen, I know that man." "Which one?" "The uncle. I've seen him before, recently." My heart started beating faster. "Where?" Brenda frowned, thinking. She took off her reading glasses, cleaned them on her shirt, put them back on. Then her eyes went wide. "A car commercial, on Channel 4 in Tucson. He was playing a friendly sales manager at one of those big dealerships on Speedway. I remember because he had the same mustache and kept pointing at the camera saying, 'Come on down to Desert Auto.'" I stared at her. "Are you sure?" "Doreen, I watched that commercial 14 times during Jeopardy reruns. I could pick that man out of a police lineup." My hands were trembling as I opened a new browser tab. Brenda leaned over my shoulder, and together we searched. Desert Auto Tucson commercial actor. It took 4 minutes. 4 minutes to find the casting credit on a small production company's website. 4 minutes to find a name. Tommy Vance, represented by Prestige Acting Solutions, Los Angeles, California. 4 minutes to find his headshot on the agency's website. The same mustache, the same smile, the same man who'd been sitting at Patrice's engagement party pretending to be Uncle Raymond. And he wasn't alone. Brenda and I sat there for the next 2 hours, cross-referencing every face in those engagement party photos with the roster of actors at Prestige Acting Solutions. One by one they appeared. Patrice's father, a character actor named Gerald Dunn, specializing in distinguished patriarch, corporate executive, silver fox roles. Her mother, Yvonne Carver, listed under elegant society matron, upscale event hostess. The aunts, the cousin, all of them. Professional actors, every last one. The total roster, 6 actors, each paid $1,500 per day, contracted for 3 months of extended family portrayal services. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Brenda reached over and squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know. I knew what I wanted to do. Call Malcolm immediately, show him everything, watch the scales fall from his eyes. But I'd been a mother long enough to know that rushing in with the truth sometimes does more damage than the lie itself. If I told Malcolm now, 2 weeks before his wedding, he'd have to choose, his mother or his fiancée. The woman who raised him or the woman he loved. And I knew, with the sick certainty of someone who'd already lost too much, that he might not choose me. There was something else, too, something I didn't want to admit, even to Brenda. I wasn't just afraid of losing Malcolm. I was afraid of being wrong about why I was doing this. Was I exposing Patrice because it was right? Or because she'd made me feel small? Because she'd taken my son and my dignity and my seat at the table, and this was my chance to take them back? In recovery, we talk about motives. We talk about the difference between doing the right thing for the right reason and doing the right thing for the wrong reason. Earl Patterson, my sponsor, God rest him, used to say, "Doreen, before you act, ask yourself one question. If nobody ever knew what you did, would you still do it? Would I still expose Patrice if Malcolm never found out? If no one applauded me for it? If I got no credit, no vindication, no satisfaction?" The answer, when I was honest with myself, was yes, because my son was about to marry a woman who'd built their entire relationship on lies. And silence, my silence specifically, would make me complicit. I looked at Brenda. I need to find out more before I do anything. And I need to be careful. If I go to Malcolm with half a story, he'll think I'm just a jealous mother trying to sabotage his happiness. Brenda nodded. "What do you need?" "Time, and maybe a little help from Vivian." I picked up my phone and called Dr. Vivian Rhodes, my business partner of 11 years. Vivian had connections in California from her residency at Stanford. She had access to business databases, professional networks, the kind of resources that turned suspicions into evidence. "Vivian, I need a favor, and I need you to be discreet." On the other end of the line, Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then, "This is about Patrice, isn't it?" "How did you know?" "Because I've been waiting for you to ask." I hung up that night with a plan, not a plan for revenge. I want to be clear about that. A plan for the truth. Because in 15 years of recovery, I'd learned one thing above all else. The truth doesn't always set you free, but it's the only thing that gives you a chance. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I sat in my living room with the lamp off, staring at the photograph on the mantel. Robert and Malcolm at the Grand Canyon, summer of 2001. Malcolm was 7 in that picture, gap-toothed and sunburned, sitting on his father's shoulders. Robert was laughing. He was always laughing back then, before I started drinking, before I turned our home into a place people tiptoed through. I talked to Robert sometimes, not out loud, I wasn't that far gone, but in my head, in that quiet space between thinking and praying. It was a habit I'd picked up after he died, and 16 years later, I still hadn't stopped. What would you do, Robert? Would you sit at table 12 and smile? Would you keep the peace? Or would you stand up and risk losing the only family we have left? I knew the answer. Robert never lied about anything in his life. He was the kind of man who'd return $1 if a cashier gave him too much change. He would have looked Patrice dead in the eye and said what needed to be said. Consequences be damned. But Robert was braver than me. Robert didn't have a decade of guilt sitting on his shoulders like a bag of wet concrete. Robert hadn't killed someone by being too drunk to drive. I reached for my phone and called the only person who could help me think straight. Vivian Rhodes called me back the next morning at 7:15. "Doreen, I've been up all night. You were right to be suspicious, but it's worse than actors." I sat down at my kitchen table. "Tell me." "Hartwell Properties doesn't exist. Not in California. Not anywhere. There's no business registration, no tax filings, no commercial permits. I checked every county recorder's office from San Diego to Sacramento." "What about the foundation?" "The Hartwell Foundation website was registered on April 2nd of this year through a privacy service. The mailing address is a UPS store in Burbank. The donation page collects money into an account registered to something called S. Morrison Financial Services." S. Morrison. Stephanie Morrison, Patrice Morrison. The S could be either. But here's the thing. S. Morrison Financial Services has no employees, no physical office, no legitimate business activity. It's a shell company, Doreen. The only transactions are outgoing payments to Prestige Acting Solutions. Approximately $75,000 over 3 months. $75,000. To hire strangers to pretend to be your family. "Vivian, who is Patrice Morrison?" A pause. "That's the question I can't answer yet. Her digital footprint only goes back about 2 years. Before that, nothing. No college records matching her name, no employment history, no previous addresses I can verify. It's like she appeared out of thin air. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the morning light move across the floor. I thought about Malcolm, my sweet, trusting Mal, planning his wedding with a woman who didn't exist, choosing centerpieces and writing vows with someone who'd manufactured her entire identity the way you'd build a set for a movie. Flats and plywood and fresh paint, and nothing behind it but darkness. I wanted to drive to his apartment right then, shake him awake, show him the headshots, the shell company, the empty spaces where Patrice's real life should have been. But I'd been a mother long enough and wrong enough to know that the truth, delivered badly, sounds exactly like a lie. I needed more, and I needed to be patient. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night at Desert Ridge Country Club, $25,000 for the weekend. Patrice's family was paying, which meant Patrice was paying, which meant money from a shell company nobody could trace was funding my son's wedding. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 15 minutes, watching through the windows. Elegantly dressed people mingled with champagne glasses. Patrice's family had flown in that morning, all 6 of them. I was about to sit across the table from professional actors and pretend I didn't know they were being paid to smile at me. Earl Patterson's voice came back to me. Something he said at a meeting in 2011, a year before he died. Doreen, the worst thing about addiction isn't the drinking, it's the silence. Every time you stay quiet about something wrong, you're taking another drink, just without the glass. I got out of the truck. Inside, I did what I'd been trained to do by 15 years of reading rooms full of people hiding things. I asked simple questions, gentle, conversational, the kind any future mother-in-law might ask. Patrice's father, Gerald Dunn, according to the casting website, told me his company was Hartwell Properties, 23 years in business. I asked which areas of California. Various regions, he said. Northern California, primarily. I asked for the company's address. A pause. I asked for the phone number. A longer pause. I asked for the name of a single project they'd completed. His champagne glass trembled slightly before he redirected to a question about the appetizers. Patrice's mother was wearing a stunning necklace. I recognized it immediately. Tiffany, the Celeste collection, released last spring. I'd seen it in the window of the Scottsdale store. When I complimented it, she said it was a European family heirloom, generations old. Really? I said. My late husband Robert used to take me to Tiffany every anniversary. That setting looks just like the new collection. Her smile cracked for exactly 1 second before she recovered. The uncle, Tommy Vance, the desert auto man himself, claimed to be a wine collector but pronounced Bordeaux like it rhymed with hairdo. An aunt said she summered in the Hamptons but couldn't name a single town. A cousin said he'd gone to Yale but went blank when I asked which residential college. None of them knew any of the other guests personally. They introduced themselves to the same people twice, and when conversations moved past surface pleasantries, every single one of them had the same remarkable talent for changing the subject. They were good, professional, but I'd spent 15 years sitting across from people who lied for a living, to themselves, to their families, to the world. I knew what performance looked like, and this entire family was performing. Then I saw the bottle. It was halfway through dinner. Patrice had excused herself to the restroom for the 3rd time in 90 minutes, a frequency that in my line of work sets off alarms. Her clutch purse was sitting on the chair beside me, slightly open. I didn't touch it. I didn't reach inside. I didn't need to, because the clasp hadn't closed properly, and the orange prescription bottle was sitting right on top, tilted at an angle that put the label directly in my line of sight. Oxycodone, 30 milligrams, quantity, 60, Dr. R. Martinez, Phoenix Pain Management. Filled October 1st, 2024, 60 pills. Filled 13 days ago. My hands went cold, then hot, then cold again. I'd held bottles like that before. Not Oxy, but the pharmacological cousins, the pills people take when drinking stops being enough. I'd counseled hundreds of people who'd started with a legitimate prescription and ended up buying from strangers in parking lots. I knew the trajectory. I knew the math. 60 pills in 13 days meant she was taking 4 to 5 a day, minimum. That wasn't pain management. That was addiction. And suddenly, everything made a different kind of sense. The trips to the bathroom every 45 minutes. The mood swings Malcolm attributed to wedding stress, the slight constriction of her pupils that I'd noticed but never connected, the way her energy would spike after those bathroom visits, then gradually drain until the next one, the agitation, the defensiveness, the need for control. I'd been so focused on her lies that I'd missed the signs right in front of me, signs I should have caught months ago because I'd lived them myself. Different substance, same disease. I pulled out my phone beneath the table and took one photograph. The label, the doctor's name, the date. Then I put my phone away and sat very still. The woman who called my recovery a situation, who told Malcolm to tone down the recovery stuff, who put me at table 12 because my past addiction made me unfit for civilized company. That woman was carrying 60 oxycodone in her clutch purse at her own rehearsal dinner. The irony should have been satisfying. It wasn't. It was just sad. Because I knew something Patrice didn't. Addiction doesn't care about your table number. It doesn't check your pedigree or your bank account or your carefully constructed backstory. It finds you wherever you are, even at Desert Ridge Country Club with a $25,000 weekend and a fiancé who doesn't know who you really are. After dinner, I caught Malcolm in the parking lot. "Mal, can I talk to you for a minute? Just us?" He looked tired. Happy, but tired. "Mom, please, not tonight. How well do you actually know Patrice's family? Have you ever visited their house? Seen their business? Met anyone from their life in California?" Malcolm ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture Robert used to make when he was frustrated. "They're private, Mom. Not everyone puts their whole life on the internet. There's a difference between private and secretive, and there's a difference between concerned and controlling." Controlling. The word landed like a slap. I stood there in the parking lot, tasting the desert air, and felt something close inside me, a door I'd been holding open. "I'm sorry," I said. "You're right. Forget I said anything." Malcolm hugged me, quick, distracted, and went back inside. As he opened the door, I saw Patrice standing in the foyer, watching us. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. She held my gaze for 3 full seconds, and in that look, I saw something I recognized. Not arrogance, not contempt. Fear. She was afraid of me. Not because I was a threat, but because I was getting close. And people who are afraid of being discovered become dangerous. I drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes with the engine running. Then I called Brenda. "I found something else tonight. A prescription bottle in her purse. Oxycodone. 60 pills. Silence on the line. Then Brenda said what I already knew. "You've done everything you can privately, Doreen. Whatever happens tomorrow is up to God and Patrice." I went to bed at midnight and stared at the ceiling until 4. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I stopped trying to figure out the right thing to do and started praying I'd recognize it when it came. The next morning, the morning of the wedding, I arrived at Desert Ridge at noon, hoping to catch Malcolm alone before the ceremony. I needed one more chance to talk to him. Just us. Without witnesses. Without Patrice. But Patrice was waiting. She was standing outside the groom's suite in a silk robe, her hair in rollers, a mimosa in one hand. When she saw me coming down the hallway, she stepped forward, blocking the door. "It's bad luck for family to see the groom before the ceremony." "That's not a real tradition, Patrice." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I know what you've been doing, Doreen. Asking questions, testing my family, playing detective with your little pop quizzes at dinner." I was making conversation. Her hand closed around my wrist. Not hard, but deliberate. "If you do anything to ruin this day, you will never see Malcolm again. I will make sure of it. He will choose me. He already has." She released my wrist, stepped back, and closed the door. I stood alone in the hallway, feeling the warmth of her grip fade from my skin, and understood with perfect clarity that every private path to the truth had been sealed shut. The ceremony was at 4 o'clock. Arizona perfect. 75 degrees, not a cloud. The kind of sky that makes you believe the world is kinder than it is. I sat at table 12, right where Patrice had put me, close enough to the kitchen to hear dishes clattering and servers arguing about side salads. But table 12 had one advantage Patrice hadn't considered, a clear, unobstructed view of the entire room. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Malcolm looked handsome in his tuxedo, genuinely happy. Patrice was stunning. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections, I stayed silent. That wasn't the time. Some battles require patience. The toasts began at 8. Derek Sullivan, the best man, spoke first. A sweet, funny speech about friendship and loyalty. Then Gerald Dunn stood up, Patrice's father, the man whose real name was on a casting website, and delivered a toast so polished it could have been performed at a dinner theater matinee. "Our family has always valued integrity," he said, and I nearly bit through my tongue. Then Patrice stood up, and the world shifted under my feet. "Thank you all for being here. Marriage is about joining two families. Of course." She paused. Her eyes found me across the room. "Not all families are equal." The room went still. "Some have legacies they're proud of. Others have complications they'd rather forget. My mother-in-law, Doreen, for instance, has overcome some significant personal challenges, alcoholism specifically." 150 people turned to look at me. I could feel every pair of eyes like a hand pressing down on my shoulders. Now, we don't judge people for their mistakes. Everyone deserves a second chance. But there are certain standards that families like ours maintain, certain expectations about the kind of people we associate with. Malcolm stood up. "Patrice, that's enough. No, honey, this needs to be said." Her voice rose. "Your mother has been asking inappropriate questions about my family all week, questioning our background, our legitimacy, as if a woman who spent years at the bottom of a bottle has any right to judge people who never needed to crawl out of a gutter." Silence. Complete suffocating silence. Even the kitchen staff had stopped clattering. Patrice raised her glass. "So while we welcome Doreen into our family, we hope she understands that there are boundaries, social boundaries, standards. Here's to new beginnings, high expectations, and the importance of knowing your place." Half the room raised their glasses on autopilot. The other half sat frozen. Malcolm's face was scarlet. Derek Sullivan was gripping his napkin so hard his knuckles were white. And I sat at table 12, hands trembling in my lap. Not from anger, not from shame, but from the sheer physical effort of staying still while someone used the worst chapter of my life as a weapon in front of everyone I knew. 15 years of sobriety, 8 recovery centers, 212 employees, 4,000 people helped back from the edge. And in 90 seconds, this 28-year-old woman erased all of it and turned me back into the drunk on the couch with the empty bottle. I looked across the room at my son's face, devastated, humiliated, torn between the woman he loved and the mother who'd raised him. And I knew. I wasn't going to sit at table 12 anymore. 30 seconds. That's how long I sat there after Patrice's toast before I made the decision that would either save my son or cost me everything. 30 seconds doesn't sound like much, but when 150 people are staring at you, some with pity, some with embarrassment, a few with the sick curiosity of bystanders at a car accident, 30 seconds feels like a lifetime. Long enough to live 3 lives, long enough to die in all of them. In the first 10 seconds, I thought about Robert. If he were sitting beside me, he wouldn't have waited 10 seconds. He would have been on his feet before Patrice finished her first sentence. Robert had a way of standing up that made the whole room rearrange itself around him, not because he was loud, but because he was certain. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. Certainty is louder than volume. In the next 10 seconds, I thought about Earl Patterson, my sponsor, dead 3 years now from pancreatic cancer. Earl, who sat with me through my first 30 days of sobriety when I was shaking so badly I couldn't hold a coffee cup. Earl, who told me once at a Tuesday night meeting, "Doreen, recovery means doing the right thing, especially when it's hard, especially when it might cost you everything you have left." In the last 10 seconds, I thought about Phyllis, and Sandra, and Marie, and every woman who'd ever sat in my office at New Hope Recovery, mascara running, hands clasped, asking me the same question. Does it ever stop, Doreen? The shame? Does it ever go away? And I always told them the same thing. Only when you stop accepting it. If I stayed at table 12, I was accepting it. I was telling every person who'd ever trusted me with their recovery that shame wins. That the Patrices of the world get to decide your worth. That you can rebuild your life from the ground up, brick by brick. 15 years of mornings choosing to stay sober, and one speech from a stranger can knock it all down. I wasn't willing to send that message. I stood up, slowly, the way you stand when you're not in a hurry because you know exactly where you're going. My chair scraped against the floor, and the sound cut through the silence like a knife on glass. Every head in the room turned. I walked toward the front of the reception hall. Not fast, not slow. Each step deliberate, measured, the way I'd learned to walk into boardrooms and courtrooms and hospital rooms over the past 15 years. The walk of a woman who'd already survived the worst thing that could happen to her and come out the other side with her spine intact. Patrice was still standing, champagne glass in hand. Her expression shifted as I approached, from triumph to confusion to something I recognized instantly. The same look I'd seen on her face in the hallway that morning. Fear. I stopped 6 feet from her, close enough to see the tiny vein pulsing at her temple, close enough to smell her perfume. Tom Ford, $280 a bottle. I'd noticed it at the rehearsal dinner. I didn't reach for the microphone. I didn't need it. 15 years of leading group therapy sessions in rooms with bad acoustics had given me a voice that carried. That was quite a speech, Patrice. She blinked. Thank you. You're right about one thing. I am an alcoholic. I let the word sit in the air. Didn't flinch from it. Didn't soften it. I lost years of my life to that disease. I lost my husband. I nearly lost my son. I woke up on floors. I blacked out behind the wheel. I did things I'll spend the rest of my life making amends for. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in water glasses. But I got help. I got sober 15 years ago, on November 3rd, 2009. I built 8 recovery centers that employ 212 people and have helped over 4,000 men and women rebuild their lives. And I am not ashamed of a single day of that journey. Not one. I paused, let it land, watched a few guests, the real ones, the people who actually knew me, nod slightly, then I shifted. Now, since you brought up the subject of honesty, Patrice, I have a few questions for your family. Simple questions. The kind any mother-in-law might ask at a wedding. I turned to the man seated at the family table. Gerald Dunn, distinguished silver hair, expensive suit, playing the role of a lifetime. Sir, you told me last night that your company is Hartwell Properties. 23 years in business, you said. Can you give me the address of your main office? Gerald's smile froze. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. A phone number, then, for the main line? Silence. The name of a single building your company has developed? One project, in 23 years. Surely you can name one. He looked at Patrice. The look was unmistakable. The look of an actor who'd forgotten his line and was searching for the director. I continued, keeping my voice even. My friend Brenda, she's sitting right over there, table 9, recognized your Uncle Raymond last week, from a car dealership commercial in Tucson, Desert Auto. Come on down, he kept saying. I allowed myself a small smile. Catchy slogan. A murmur rippled through the room. Guests were glancing at each other, then at Uncle Raymond, Tommy Vance, who had gone the color of old milk. So Brenda and I did some research, and we found him, and every single person sitting at this family table, on the website of a Los Angeles casting agency called Prestige Acting Solutions. I took out my phone and opened the browser tab I'd saved. The headshots. Gerald Dunn, Yvonne Carver, Tommy Vance. All of them, lined up like a theater program. I handed the phone to Malcolm. My son stared at the screen. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that broke apart behind his eyes like ice cracking on a spring river. Your entire family, Patrice, are professional actors, hired at $1,500 a day each, paid through a shell company called S. Morrison Financial Services, which has no employees, no office, and no legitimate business activity. Tommy Vance, Uncle Raymond, stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. He didn't say a word. He just walked straight for the exit, pulling off his boutonniere as he went, like an actor leaving the stage. The cousin followed 10 seconds later. Then both aunts, moving quickly, heads down, purses clutched to their sides. Within 2 minutes, 4 of Patrice's 6 family members had fled the reception. Gerald Dunn, the father, sat frozen, staring at his plate. Yvonne Carver, the mother, had her hand on the Tiffany necklace, gripping it like a lifeline. Patrice's champagne glass was shaking so badly the liquid was sloshing over the rim. "This is insane," she said. "You're making this up. These are my—" "There's one more thing." I took my phone back from Malcolm and opened the photograph I'd taken the night before at the rehearsal dinner. The orange prescription bottle, the white label, clear as a headline. I've been in recovery for 15 years, Patrice. I know what addiction looks like. I've seen the signs in you for months. The bathroom trips every 45 minutes, the mood swings, the constricted pupils. Last night at the rehearsal dinner, your purse was open, and I saw this. I held the phone up so Malcolm could see, so the nearest tables could see. Oxycodone, 30 milligrams, 60 pills, Dr. R. Martinez, Phoenix Pain Management. The woman who just told 150 people that I'm low-class trash for being a recovering alcoholic is carrying prescription opioids in her purse at her own wedding. The room didn't gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It was the sound of 150 people holding their breath at the same time. The woman who told my son to tone down the recovery stuff, who said my past made me unfit for polite society, who seated me next to the kitchen because she was ashamed to be associated with addiction. I lowered my phone. That woman has the same disease I do. The only difference is, I got help, and she's still hiding. Malcolm stood up. His face was a landscape of devastation, every feature rearranged by betrayal. Patrice, he said, his voice cracked on the second syllable. Is any of this true? Patrice opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. She looked like a woman standing in the wreckage of a building she'd built with her own hands, watching the last wall fall. Then call your father, Malcolm said. Right now, your real father. Put him on speaker. She didn't move. The silence lasted 5 seconds. It was the longest 5 seconds of my life, longer than the 30 at table 12, longer than the night Robert died, longer than the moment in 2009 when I stood at the door of Desert Springs Treatment Center and decided to walk in. Malcolm reached over and slowly pulled the wedding ring from his finger. He set it on the table. The gold made a small, clear sound against the white linen, the quietest noise in the world, and the loudest thing I've ever heard. The wedding's off. Malcolm, please, I can explain. I don't want an explanation. I want the truth, and I don't think you know how to give it. Gerald Dunn, the last actor standing, rose from his chair. He reached up, unclasped the cufflinks that weren't his, and set them on the table next to the ring. Then he looked at me, just for a second, a small nod. Not an apology. Actors don't apologize for playing a role, but an acknowledgement. I understand. No hard feelings, just business. He walked out. Yvonne Carver followed, leaving the Tiffany necklace on her napkin like a tip, and then there were none. The room emptied slowly, the way water drains from a bathtub, fast at first, then down to the last thin streams. Guests gathered their things and murmured goodbyes. Some hugged Malcolm on their way out. Most didn't know what to say. What do you say to a groom whose wedding just detonated in front of him? Derek Sullivan stayed. Brenda stayed. Vivian, who'd been watching from the back, stayed. The wedding coordinator stood by the 5-tier cake, looking like she might cry. Malcolm walked outside without a word. Derek followed him. And then it was just me and Patrice. She was sitting at the head table, alone. Her wedding dress, a Vera Wang, she'd mentioned the price once, $11,000, was crumpled around her like a collapsed tent. Her mascara had carved 2 dark rivers down her cheeks. The prescription bottle had fallen from her purse at some point during the chaos and was lying on the white tablecloth next to Malcolm's ring, orange plastic and gold metal, sickness and broken promises side by side. I could have left. I'd done what I came to do, or rather what Patrice's speech had forced me to do. The truth was out. My son was free. I could walk to my truck, drive home, sit in my dark living room, and wait for the phone to ring. But I didn't leave. Because when I looked at Patrice, really looked, past the ruined makeup and the designer dress and the lies, I saw something I hadn't expected. Something I recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting on a letter you forgot you wrote. I saw myself, 15 years ago, sitting alone in my kitchen the night after Robert's funeral, empty bottle on the floor, casseroles from neighbors piling up on the counter, untouched. Malcolm asleep in his room. And me, just me, with nothing but the sound of the refrigerator humming and the knowledge that I had destroyed everything good in my life and there was no one left to blame but myself. No one sat with me that night. No one came. And the loneliness of that moment, the specific bone-deep cold of being alone with your worst self, was something I wouldn't wish on anyone, not even the woman who'd just humiliated me in front of 150 people. I pulled out the chair next to Patrice and sat down. She flinched. "What are you doing?" "Sitting." "Why?" I didn't answer. We sat in silence for a full minute. The catering staff moved around us, clearing plates, boxing up centerpieces. Someone turned off the fairy lights. The room got dimmer. Then Patrice said in a voice so small it barely existed, "You want to know why I hate people like you?" I waited. Because my mother was one. And the real story, the one underneath all the other stories, the foundation beneath the facade, finally came out. Patrice Morrison didn't grow up in Palos Verdes. She grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a double-wide trailer on a dirt road off Route 35. Her mother's name was Lorraine Mitchell. Lorraine was an alcoholic. "She started drinking when I was 4, Patrice said. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the tablecloth, tracing a pattern in the linen with her fingernail. Wine first, then vodka, then whatever was cheapest at the gas station on Route 35. I said nothing, just listened. The way I'd listened to 4,000 people tell me their stories over 15 years. I used to make my own dinner when I was 6 because she'd be passed out on the couch by 4 in the afternoon. Peanut butter sandwiches, mostly. Sometimes cereal if we had milk. I went to school in dirty clothes because she forgot to do laundry. The other kids called me the stinky girl. A pause. Children are cruel when they smell weakness. When Patrice was 11, Dayton Child Protective Services removed her from Lorraine's home. She lived in 3 foster families over the next 7 years. The first was kind but overwhelmed. The second was indifferent. The third was something she didn't want to talk about, and I didn't push. At 18, she aged out of the system with a garbage bag of clothes and $400 in a savings account a social worker had set up. "I changed everything," she said. "My name, my accent, the way I walked, the way I held a fork. I watched YouTube videos on etiquette. I studied how rich people talked, how they dressed, what wines they ordered, how they introduced themselves at parties. I practiced in front of mirrors until I couldn't hear Dayton anymore." She created Patrice Morrison, California old money, real estate family, foundation work, a woman with a past so polished it reflected light. And when I met Malcolm and things got serious, I panicked. He wanted to meet my family. How do you tell someone you love that you don't have a family? That your mother is a 61-year-old alcoholic living in a subsidized apartment in Dayton who you haven't spoken to in 9 years? That the last time you saw her, she was passed out in her own vomit on Christmas morning? So she hired one. 6 actors. 3 months of preparation, $75,000 she'd scraped together from credit cards and a personal loan she'd taken out using fabricated financial statements. "I know it sounds insane," she whispered, "but you don't understand what it's like to come from nothing. No family photos on the mantle, no Thanksgiving traditions, no mother who calls to ask about your day. I just wanted, for one day, to feel like I came from somewhere." And the pills, the oxycodone. She'd started after Malcolm proposed. The pressure of maintaining the lie, the constant fear of exposure, the anxiety that clawed at her chest every time I asked a question she couldn't answer. A doctor gave me a prescription for back pain. I took one and the anxiety stopped. Just stopped, like someone turned off a faucet. And I thought, just for the wedding, just until I get through this, then I'll stop. I knew that sentence. I'd said it myself. Just one more drink. Just until the funeral. Just until Malcolm's school year ends. Then I'll stop. The most dangerous lie in the English language, because the person telling it believes it completely. Then Patrice said the thing that broke me open. "Every time I looked at you, Doreen, I saw my mother. I stopped breathing. You talk about recovery like it's something to be proud of, like it makes you brave. But all I could hear was my mother saying the same things. I'm getting better, Patty. I'm going to meetings. I'm doing the work." 6 times. She tried recovery 6 times. Her voice cracked. And every time she relapsed. And every time I was the one who found her on the kitchen floor. The tears were falling now. Not pretty tears. Not movie tears. The ugly, convulsive kind that come from a place so deep you didn't know it existed until it opened up beneath you. I didn't hate you because you're an alcoholic. I hated you because you got better. Because if you could do it, If recovery actually works, then why couldn't she? Why wasn't I enough to make her stop? I sat there with tears running down my own face, not from pity, from recognition, because I understood now, fully, completely, the way you understand something that's been true your whole life, but you've only just found the words for. Why Patrice had spent 6 months trying to destroy me. I wasn't her enemy. I was proof that her mother had a choice. And her mother didn't choose her. We sat in silence for a long time. The catering staff finished clearing the tables and left. The room was dark except for the emergency exit signs glowing red above the doors. Finally, I opened my purse. Not for a document, not for evidence, for a business card. Not mine. I didn't want this to feel like a recruitment pitch. It was for a program I trusted, run by a woman I'd known for a decade. A good place, a safe place. I set it on the table next to the prescription bottle. I can't undo what happened tonight, I said. And I can't forgive the lies you told my son. What you did to Malcolm, building a relationship on deception. That's something only he can decide how to deal with. I paused. But the addiction, that part I understand. And I know you can't fix it alone. Patrice stared at the card. Why are you helping me? After everything I said? I stood up and pushed in my chair. Because 15 years ago, I was sitting alone in my kitchen after my husband's funeral, and nobody came. Nobody sat down next to me. And I swore that if I ever got the chance, I would be the person who stayed. I walked toward the exit. At the door, I stopped. That card isn't for Malcolm. It isn't for me. It's for the little girl in Dayton who deserved a better mother. Call when you're ready. I pushed through the door and stepped into the Arizona night. 72 degrees. Stars everywhere. The parking lot smelled like jasmine from the landscaping and diesel from the catering trucks. I walked to my truck, got in, and sat there for a long time with my hands on the wheel, not driving anywhere. 3 months later, Malcolm came to my office on a Tuesday afternoon. He looked different. Not happy exactly, but clearer, like someone had wiped the fog from a window he'd been looking through for months. Mom, got a minute? Always. He sat across from my desk in the same chair where 4,000 people had sat before him. I started going to Al-Anon meetings, learning about codependency, about how I ignored every red flag because I wanted her to be real. How's that going? Hard, but good. He paused. She wrote me a letter. From the treatment center. She checked herself in. Not here, in Ohio, near where she actually grew up. She apologized for everything. Asked if I'd consider trying again when she gets out. What did you tell her? That I appreciate the apology, but I can't rebuild something that was built on lies. He looked at his hands. How do you feel about that? I think that's the clearest thing you've ever said, Mal. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Mom, I'm sorry. For asking you to tone down the recovery stuff, for letting her put you at table 12, for not believing you when you tried to warn me. I should have. Stop. I reached across the desk and took his hand. You loved someone. That's not a character flaw, and you stood up when it mattered. You stood up first. That's what mothers do. He got up to leave, then paused at the door, the same way Robert used to pause, one hand on the frame, half turned, like he'd just remembered something important. Mom, I'm proud of you, not for what you did at the wedding, for all of it. The 15 years, the centers, the people you've helped, all of it. After he left, I sat in my chair and looked out the window. Across the courtyard, a group of clients was walking to their evening session. A young woman held the door for an older man. He nodded thanks. She smiled. Small kindnesses. That's what recovery looks like up close. People ask me sometimes, was it worth it? The scene at the wedding, the risk, the fallout. The honest answer is, I don't know. There are nights I lie awake wondering if there was a quieter way, a kinder way. Maybe there was. But I also know this. My son was about to marry a lie, and my silence would have made me part of it. 15 years ago, I was the woman everyone whispered about. The drunk, the bad mother, the one who couldn't keep it together. I crawled my way back. Not for respectability, not for money, not for anyone's approval, but for the chance to be the kind of person my son could be proud of. The kind of person my husband always believed I could be, even when I couldn't believe it myself. That night at table 12, I wasn't fighting for my pride. I was fighting for every person who's ever been told that their worst moment is their only moment. Every woman who's been called damaged for having the courage to seek help. Every mother who's been told she's not enough because of where she's been. And if you're listening to this, if you're struggling with addiction or shame, or with people who make you feel like you don't deserve a seat at the table, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. Your past is not your whole story. It's just the first chapter, and you get to write the rest. So pull up a chair, sit wherever you want, not at table 12, not near the kitchen, not in the back where nobody can see you. Sit at the front. You've earned your place.